So yeah, I think if you're in for a challenge, this is a good sector to be in.
I'm so pleased that you would like to share your experience as a successful female leader with us. I, of course, know you as a dedicated colleague who also is the Global Fleet Director in our Tankers division. You joined Stolt Nielsen back in 2019. And if I look at your CV, you've always had a strong affinity with the shipping industry. And you also told me that in your private life, you're a passionate mountain climber. and which is really interesting. So it's quite intriguing, this broad experience you have, and it made me think. When you were a child, what were your dreams about what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I think I always loved ships, and my grandfather, he was a seaman.
Ah.
And we're talking 1920, 1930, 1940, and the big passenger ships. And when I was little and I was staying over, he would give me the world map, and I could just point at any location, and he always would have a super exciting story for me. And in hindsight, probably a lot of cock and balls. But it was so exciting, and I think that sparked my love for the sea and the world and ships. Yeah. So I always wanted to do something with ships, and
yeah. And I can imagine that you had never dreamt of, when you were a child, of ending up in a situation as a fleet director with these significant challenges of a lockdown and getting seafarers on and off ships. And this has been not only a challenge for Stolt Nielsen, but for all shipping companies. What is the status right now within Stolt Nielsen and getting seafarers on and off ships?
Right now it has normalized, luckily. So I must say our crewing department, they have been doing little miracles, or big miracles even. Asia Pacific is still a bit difficult, so we're still deviating ships to Manila Bay today. But yeah, overall it has normalized, and I'm quite lucky to work for a company also that allows deviating ships, because unfortunately it's not a given. So I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, and we've also all seen these dreadful stories about seafarers being trapped on board ships for many months. How do we keep our seafarers motivated?
Yeah, so we did put a lot of emphasis on communication. So especially in the beginning when we had these very hard months, the superintendents were really calling 2-3 times a week just to gauge the atmosphere on board and to make sure that we could keep track of these difficult cases, where somebody really had to go home because something in the private life happened, and, I don't know, sick parents or something. And then, yeah, it was really a lot about communication, about setting up a direct line with the seafarers to answer their questions and concerns. We increased the internet time on board so people could keep in contact with their family and friends.
Yeah, and which role did you play in this? Because this is a sort of crisis management situation.
Yeah, it's really, you could call it a communication coordinator or something. So it was really a lot about talking to the superintendents, getting their feedback, how it's going on the ships, getting information from the company to the ships, educating myself about the virus, because everybody had questions about, do we have to test, or what PPE do we need, what protective equipment, right? What about hygiene? Do we need gloves or face masks, and which ones? So I really, especially in the beginning, I spent a lot of time in educating myself on all the things I never wanted to know about viruses, mode of transmission, and prevention, hygiene.
Yeah. I can imagine that your grandfather had never thought that that this would happen within the shipping world, right?
Well, who knows? We have the Spanish flu.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Being the fleet director, being a female fleet director in a traditional company with a strong heritage and also a sort of male-dominated culture, especially in the fleet management part of our business. I'm very curious to hear more about the journey of, how did you get to where you are today? So could you tell us a little bit about this journey from, from a childhood dream and then to becoming a global fleet director?
So actually when I was 16, 17, I was wanting to become a captain, but then my eyesight stopped me. So then the next best thing was to study naval architecture, which I did, so I could still be in contact with ships. And so I did that. Then I started working for class in Hamburg for a while, in classification society. As a naval architect, I was doomed to ballast tanks, so that was my fate for the next 40 years, basically, had I stayed there. And I can tell you, if you've seen 1,000 tanks or so, you've probably seen enough. I got bored and I applied as a superintendent. And from there on, it pretty much just happened. So I got offered another job. I got promoted. My CEO told me to do an MBA. I did an MBA. Then it was a bit about restructuring. So we went back from a more matrix organization to a more functional organization. So I moved on and here I am.
Here you are. Recent studies on female leadership show that they identify the low rate of promotion of women at the first managerial level. They call it the broken rung, but it is holding back women from taking the first step into a manager position. And in addition to that, there is also the more traditional glass ceiling that block women's chances of being promoted into senior position. What has your experience been in that respect?
I must say personally, and of course I can only speak for myself here, but I never really had that experience, and I must say I always had very supportive bosses and colleagues, and I don't feel that anyone ever put obstacles in my way. Doesn't mean I always got what I wanted, of course, but I can say I was treated fairly, as far as I can see.
Yeah.
I think it is getting easier actually, because a lot of companies now have diversity and inclusion big on their agenda, and they're actively looking for female managers and female leadership. So I think it's getting easier.
You mentioned diversity and inclusion, and we also see it within Stolt Nielsen that diversity and inclusion is becoming part of the strategic agenda. So if we look at what we internally do within Stolt Nielsen to promote women in leadership roles, is it in your experience, what should be the core of the gender-specific development in programs?
To be honest, I don't think I would make it gender-specific, because I don't think there's this one woman or the one man. I mean, there's so much personalities and characters out there, and you can be introvert or extrovert or competitive or creative or whatever, and it's not because you're a man or a woman. So I think it's more about acknowledging that there's different personalities out there, and that is fine, and getting away from the idea that a leader has to be loud and dominant and authoritative.
And how can we ensure that our sector, so the chemical sector, attracts and retains the talents needed to pursue sustainable development of the industry over the coming years? Especially because we will see so many changes happening within the petrochemical sector.
Going forward, I think a lot is really about allowing for different profiles, not going for that one profile only, but acknowledging that diverse teams usually perform much better. And I think the other point, which becomes more and more important, is work-life balance. So getting away from this 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 model, but looking more for output rather than screen time.
Yeah.
And
you are a woman who's done a STEM education yourself. What are your thoughts and ideas on how can we motivate more young women to consider these educations?
I don't know how it is today, but at least when I started with university, it had a very male focus. I remember I was sitting in a session where you could try to find out if that was for you or not, and I remember the professor said, "Oh, but we also have women." So, for instance, last year we had this woman who developed some hair dryer product, and I was like, "Hair dryer, okay, thank you." Yeah, it wasn't very appealing. So,
No.
I think as a young person, you choose a profession from what you know, and that's either what you know from your daily life or from TV or from your family maybe. And I think especially all the STEM field is very abstract still, and I think there a lot could be done with better marketing. It's a combination of several factors. It's probably a mix about role models, but also in school already exposing children in general to a much more wider field of experiences, and also making STEM more attractive and getting away from this formula approach. I mean, of course you need formulas and they're important, but what is the practical application? What can I do with it, and making that more attractive?
Yeah.
So I think a lot could be in helping teachers to develop more exciting material.
And talking about the younger generation, they're also very committed to fighting climate change, and especially within the shipping industry, this is very it's a challenge, and it's also very important. So how can we remove the polluter label and instead leverage the sustainability efforts and showcase much of the good works and initiatives that are actually made within the chemical sector to attract these young people who are very critical and help them to be part of our transformation process?
I think we're back to education and marketing then, because for a lot of people, chemistry and chemicals is something very abstract, and they connect it naturally to all the negative stuff. But actually, everything on this planet comes down to a chemical formula, and we can't do without chemicals. So that's one part of the answer, I would say. And then the second part, when it comes to sustainability, it's often portrayed in the media about all or nothing and blaming and shaming. And if you don't live in the forest and you don't commit to not having electricity and wearing clothes right out of the Bible and eating whatever you find, then you're a bad person in terms of sustainability, so you might as well not do anything. And I think that's wrong. I think it's about everybody doing what they can in their sector, and I think especially in our sector, there's a lot to be gained still, and a lot of steps to be made, and that can be from more environmentally friendly materials and chemicals over reducing our carbon footprint. So yeah, I think if you're in for a challenge, this is a good sector to be in.
So implementing low carbon technologies and more circular practices, that demands a considerable effort from the company, and it may actually also include a change in our business strategy and new partnerships in the future. What are within your role and within ship management, what are your innovation priorities to address the sustainability challenge?
So as Stolt Stolt Tankers specifically, we're looking into climate action and life below water from the UN core goals. So climate action, of course, is all about carbon footprint and greenhouse gases. So it starts from designing better ships, more fuel-efficient ships, having better hydrodynamics, better engines, and then when it comes to operation, it's about finding the best route for the ship, making sure you have the, again, shortest route, but then in combination with the weather and the current, maintaining your engines. yeah, it's a lot around that. Life below water, then we're talking ballast water management, we're talking tank cleaning.
We've also read a lot about shipping companies wanting to build the first carbon neutral ship within the next, some say 2025, some say 2030. What are your thoughts about this?
I think it's good that we challenge ourselves. Whether the technology is ready in 5 years or 10 years from now, that needs to be seen. And offsetting carbon might be part of the equation here. But you know, in shipping we have seen very often new regulations where we were scratching our heads and wondering how on earth we could meet those, and because we thought the industry wasn't ready for it. But then came the implementation date, and the industry actually was ready. Or maybe it was postponed by another 2 years, but hey, what's 2 years, right? So
yeah,
it's good to have a challenge.